400 years ago, humanity was at the peak of prosperity, but their souls were filled with deceit and hatred for one another. And so, humans created the darkness, a weapon of mass destruction intended to end all wars. However, the darkness witnessed the true nature of humanity and decided to eradicate them all to liberate the world. As humanity was driven to the brink of extinction, a colossal pillar of light pierced through the clouds, and a humanoid dragon wielding a sword appeared. The two beings recognized each other as mortal enemies, destined to destroy the other. Their ensuing battle shook the very foundation of the earth, sinking continents and leaving behind an unimaginable scale of destruction. In the end, the dragon emerged victorious. The tale became the stuff of legends, and the truth behind the battle faded into obscurity. 400 years later, a kingdom found itself under attack by a malevolent sorcerer and his monstrous army. Soldiers fought valiantly to defend their princess. Among them were Yoko, the daughter of the high priest, and Lusai, a timid young man. In the past, Yoko's father had imparted upon her an immensely powerful spell, capable of summoning the spirit of the legendary black sorcerer into Lusai's body. However, the summoning required a kiss from a virgin, which is why her father forbade her from marrying. Lusai's weakness earned him scorn from the other soldiers. However, due to Yoko's status as the high priest's daughter, they tolerated his presence. Yoko yearned for Lusai to grow stronger, but it proved to be a challenge for him. The princess then approached Yoko, requesting her to break the seal on the black sorcerer's power. However, Yoko hesitated due to her apprehension about the kiss. At that moment, the sorcerer and his monstrous horde breached the defenses. 3 high-ranking officials revealed themselves as traitors, choosing self-preservation over loyalty. Their betrayal was met with a swift and brutal end, crushed beneath the might of colossal monsters. 2 monstrous beings rampaged through the ranks of soldiers, and Lusai was injured while protecting Yoko. Left with no other choice, Yoko cast aside her reservations and kissed Lusai, successfully breaking the seal. Lusai awakened with a second personality, the embodiment of the ancient sorcerer, Schneider. Resentful for being sealed within a child by Yoko's father, Schneider unleashed his fury upon the 2 colossal monsters, obliterating them with a single attack. Despite his resurrection, he still identified himself as Lusai, Yoko's friend. The news of Lusai becoming the embodiment of the evil sorcerer Schneider sent shockwaves through the kingdom. Schneider was infamous for initiating the Golem War 15 years prior. He was defeated by 5 great heroes, and before his death, he used forbidden magic to ensure his reincarnation. The people pleaded for Schneider's help, but he showed no interest. He owed a debt to Yoko, not to them. Despite his newfound power and arrogant demeanor, he couldn't bring himself to defy her. Yoko demanded that Schneider help those around them, and he reluctantly agreed. The sorcerer, a devout follower of Schneider, refused to believe the man before him was the real Schneider, considering him an imposter. He commanded his forces to attack, only to witness their annihilation with a flick of Schneider's wrist. Enraged and disbelieving, the sorcerer unleashed a devastating bolt of lightning upon Schneider. Schneider was left charred and motionless. Undeterred, the sorcerer approached and repeatedly struck Schneider's head. However, the blackened exterior crumbled away, revealing that the attack had merely scratched Schneider's face. Infuriated, Schneider unleashed his magic, summoning the fires of hell upon the sorcerer. The sorcerer pleaded for mercy, but it was too late. The incantation had been uttered, and he was incinerated into ashes. Princess offered her gratitude to Schneider, but he paid her no mind and instead turned to Yoko, asking her a simple question before vanishing. Yoko chased after Schneider, seeking to know his next course of action. Schneider decided to tell Yoko his plans. First, he would exact revenge on her father for imprisoning him. Next, he would wage war to conquer the world, eliminating anyone who dared to stand in his way, sparing only Yoko as promised. Despite knowing he was a demon, Yoko found herself developing feelings for him. Schneider, noticing her conflicted emotions, leaned in and kissed her. Suddenly, his demeanor shifted, and Schneider reverted back to Lusai. Yoko realized her kiss might be the key to sealing Schneider away once more. Meanwhile, the sorcerer's followers received news of their master's demise, killed by high-level fire magic that only one person could wield. They dispatched a spy to uncover the identity of the sorcerer's killer. That night, Yoko was plagued by nightmares of Schneider breaking free, murdering her father, and amassing an army of monsters to conquer the world. She woke up startled to find Lucai in her bed, sneaking a cuddle. Unbeknownst to them, a monstrous hydra was approaching the kingdom. The next morning, during breakfast, Yoko noticed a dark cloud approaching. Her father arrived, explaining he was needed at the castle, and that in a worst-case scenario, they might have to awaken him again. At the palace, a messenger delivered dire news. A neighboring kingdom had fallen to a horde of sorcerers and monsters, who were now marching towards their own. As the situation grew increasingly desperate, the high priest arrived with Yoko. The princess thanked Lucai for his past assistance, but Yoko, knowing Lucai had no memory of his time as Schneider, suggested it was best not to press the matter. The high priest suspected that the enemy was plotting to resurrect the ancient being of darkness. Suddenly, soldiers rushed in, reporting a hydra attacking the city. Hydras were creatures of the wilds, and their presence in the human realm indicated someone was controlling it. The palace fell into disarray. The officials, their magic primarily focused on healing and support, possessed no spells powerful enough to defeat such a creature. All eyes turned to Yoko, urging her to awaken Schneider. Though embarrassed at the thought of kissing Lucai in front of everyone, the escalating chaos and her father's insistence that it was a necessity forced her hand. Reluctantly, she asked Lucai to close his eyes, leaned in, and awakened Schneider with a kiss. As Schneider regained his senses, the officials bombarded him with demands, expecting his compliance. However, Schneider, arrogant and defiant as ever, cared nothing for their pleas. His only desire was world domination. He conjured a wall of fire, holding the officials back as he ushered the king and princess to safety. He declared his debt to Yoko repaid and announced his intention to kill her father, one of the 5 heroes who had sealed him away, as the first step in his conquest. Yet, a flicker of fear, a remnant of their bond, prevented him from fully defying Yoko. As Schneider summoned a bolt of lightning to strike the high priest, the old man erected a holy barrier, nullifying Schneider's magic. However, the barrier also sealed away the high priest's own spellcasting abilities. Unfazed, the high priest resorted to a different tactic. Using his own blood, he activated a hidden seal, releasing his golem, imprisoned deep beneath the palace. The colossal golem erupted from the ground, tearing through the palace walls as the high priest directed its assault towards Schneider. Realizing his magic was useless against the golem, the high priest prepared for the worst. Just then, the Hydra, under the command of the mysterious sorcerer, arrived at the palace, seeking to eliminate the one who killed its master. The sight of his summon being used against him enraged Schneider. Schneider called him square-face catfish, which enraged him. He then ordered Hydra to attack, but Golem caught and dealt with Hydra. He desperately jumped at Schneider, only to get punched to the ground and then incinerated by a fire spell. Schneider wanted to continue with the high priest, but Yoko stopped him, saying she was wrong to see him as Lucai. She no longer had feelings for him. He then revealed to her that Lucy and Schneider were 2 halves of the same soul. If Lucai died, so would Schneider. Therefore, whoever Lucai loved, he would love too. She didn't believe him, so he proved it with a kiss and then reverted to Lucy. Meanwhile, one of the 4 leaders of the enemy faction realized the magic they just witnessed must be Schneider's. 15 years ago, Schneider led them on a conquest, but now it seemed he was fighting for the kingdom. They needed to investigate. If Schneider had truly betrayed them, they would have to take action against him. The first of their group, the ninja Master Gara, would be the first threat. The high priest and the ministers were discussing the spreading black cloud. To make matters worse, their opponent had a sorcerer named Kai Su. It was said that Kai Su was Schneider's closest confidant, and his power was no less formidable than Schneider's. At that moment, Kai Su went to see what they had just obtained from under the seal in the place they had just captured the head of darkness. Soon, they would continue to conquer other places. Once they broke through the remaining 2 kingdoms, they would be able to break the entire seal and resurrect the darkness. The ministers were again considering awakening Schneider due to the greater threat approaching. But Yoko argued that it was too dangerous and that she and Lucai were not their tools. The ministers acknowledged they were pushing her too hard and agreed that bringing Schneider back was too risky. She then brought Lucai home, where he decided to do laundry. As she sat lost in thought, Yoko heard Lucy being bullied again and ran to his rescue. She couldn't believe that a child so kind could possess half of the soul of such a violent and cruel being. That night, the two went to bed, unaware of the tension within the palace walls. Suddenly, Gaara and his ninjas infiltrated Yoko's home, slaying the guards. He barged into her room, attempting to take her hostage. He demanded information about Schneider, but she refused to divulge anything. Enraged, he strung her up, threatening to punish her unless she talked. As Gaara was about to make good on his threat, Lucy woke up. Yoko reassured him that everything was fine, urging him to go back to sleep. But Lucy had seen enough. He saw Gaara lifting Yoko's skirt, and Schneider was forced to resurface. He demanded Gaara remove his hands from his woman. He informed Gaara that the two forced awakenings had weakened the seal, allowing him to seize control while Lucy slept. Gaara, surprised to find Schneider residing within a child's body, took Yoko hostage. Realizing the high priest was returning, he summoned a dragon and fled with Yoko. He intended to use her as leverage to force the high priest to hand over Schneider. Gaara returned to his base with Yoko while Lucy was taken back to the palace. The high priest, unsure where to find another magic-wielding maiden, was offered a solution when the princess volunteered herself. The king, however, adamantly refused, as the royal kiss represented marriage. But the princess wouldn't allow her father to be fixated on such outdated traditions. She wished to contribute to the fight against evil like Yoko. The king, determined to avoid further disruption, was escorted back to his chambers. The high priest acknowledged the risks associated with summoning Schneider, but he chose to gamble on the possibility that Lucy's personality might influence Schneider's thoughts. Schneider was summoned once more, feeling a twinge of disappointment that it wasn't Yoko who awakened him. The high priest pleaded with him to save his daughter, but Schneider, harboring resentment towards the priest and an aversion to Yoko's influence, remained focused on his own ambitions. He believed conquering the world would grant him access to any woman he desired. He grabbed the princess, declaring that he could claim her at any moment. Unimpressed by his arrogance, the princess responded with a resounding slap. Undeterred, Schneider, accompanied by the princess and the soldiers, marched towards Gaara's hideout. Gaara interrogated Yoko about the method to awaken Schneider, noticing her hesitation. He deduced that she had developed feelings for Schneider and decided to reveal a truth to her. Meanwhile, the soldiers, seeing nothing but open space, began to doubt Schneider's sense of direction. Their doubts were quickly dispelled as ninjas surrounded them from every direction. The princess, eager to contribute, drew her sword, but her presence only served to hinder the soldiers. Schneider effortlessly dispatched the ninjas, ordering the princess to discard her sword and armor for better mobility. Begrudgingly, she complied, earning the soldiers' resentment and threats directed at Schneider. Gaara, observing Yoko's stubborn silence, unleashed a slime monster to entertain her. At that moment, Schneider arrived at the hideout's gate and decided to make a grand entrance. The booming sound alerted Gaara to their arrival. Recognizing the magic signature, Gaara, curious to test their abilities against his traps, allowed them passage. Schneider's group encountered a monstrous minotaur guarding the path. The creature charged, forcing Schneider to shield the princess. However, she slapped him again for daring to touch her. Spotting a staircase behind the beast, Schneider, along with the soldiers, retreated. He urged the soldiers to remain behind, reminding them of their duty to protect the princess. Easily swayed by his words, the soldiers stayed put. The princess, refusing to be left behind, attempted to follow, but Schneider swiftly scooped her up and continued ascending. As they climbed, they encountered a formidable demon eye protected by a powerful barrier. Yoko, stripped bare by the slime, was prepped by Gaara to witness the impending showdown between him and Schneider, eager to determine the stronger of the two. Schneider, momentarily panicked, struggled to find a way to bypass the barrier. The princess, realizing his concern for Yoko was hindering his focus, created a diversion. She snuck behind the demon eye, momentarily distracting it and weakening the barrier just long enough for Schneider to deliver the final blow. Relieved that she contributed, the princess recognized Schneider's embarrassment masked as annoyance. Infuriated, he picked her up, continuing their banter as they entered another corridor. Schneider admitted his exhaustion from excessive magic use, emphasizing the mental strain it placed on him. He conserved his energy, anticipating the inevitable confrontation with Gaara. Suddenly, the princess, drawn to a gleaming sword, picked it up, unaware of its cursed nature. As she carelessly swung the blade, it grazed Schneider, infecting him with its poison. Stricken with guilt and desperate to help, she asked what she could do. "Suck out the poison," Schneider commanded. Meanwhile, Gara revealed to Yoko the true motive behind resurrecting the demon god, control. They sought to manipulate the deity's power, using it to obliterate the existing world and create a new one according to their design. He also found it strange that Schneider had yet to make an appearance. Driven by remorse, the princess began drawing the poison from Schneider's wound. As she did, the demon residing within the sword manifested, enraged by their disturbance of its slumber. Gara noted that Schneider, while a formidable mage, specialized primarily in fire and wind magic. The fire demon, immune to all fire-based attacks, rendered Schneider's signature fire magic useless. Forced into a defensive position, Schneider shielded himself from the demon's relentless fire blasts. Unfazed by Schneider's counterattacks, the demon unleashed an explosion, shaking the foundations of the hideout. The heat intensified, causing lava to seep through the cracks. Knowing he couldn't hide forever, Schneider prepared to confront the demon, ordering the princess to stay put. Stepping out from his shield, Schneider countered the demon's flames with his own, amplified by the demon's own power. The resulting blast sent the demon hurtling through the ceiling, crashing into the chamber where Gara patiently waited. The demon, disbelievingly, lamented its first defeat in 300 years. Schneider, with a hint of smugness, remarked on the demon's youthfulness compared to his own 400 years. As the demon transformed back into its sword form, Schneider was reunited with Yoko. Gara, observing Schneider's willingness to risk himself for a woman he had yet to claim, commented on Schneider's change. Schneider, however, was enraged, not because Yoko was stripped bare, but because Gara had seen her like that before him. Amused by Schneider's jealousy, Gara readied himself for battle. He predicted a swift victory. In a battle between mage and swordsman, the one who lands the first blow holds the advantage. However, as soon as the fight began, Schneider was caught off guard by Gara's unexpected long-range attack. Gara pressed his advantage, engaging Schneider in close combat. Schneider parried the blows, creating distance to cast a fire spell. Gara charged through the flames, severing Schneider's hand. Despite the injury, Schneider unleashed his magic, severing one of Gara's hands in return. Gara narrowly dodged the full force of the spell, knowing a direct hit would be fatal. Both, consumed by rage and determination, prepared for the final clash. Gara, aiming to shatter Schneider's resolve, taunted him with lies about his exploits with Yoko. Yoko vehemently denied his claims, while Schneider, indifferent to the truth, cared only about defeating Gara. As Schneider began chanting a spell, Gara countered with his own long-range attack. Schneider deflected the attack, causing both spells to collide in a catastrophic explosion that ripped through the hideout, reducing it to rubble. Gara and Schneider then emerged from the rubble, both of their arms reattached by Schneider. Gara, seeing a change in Schneider, went to look for the dragon hatchling. The princess returned the hatchling to Gara, acknowledging Schneider's barrier had saved both the girls and the dragon. Gara admitted defeat, while the princess found Schneider's potential for change surprising, despite his cruelty. Schneider then received a scolding from Yoko, which made Gara laugh, seeing the once cruel Schneider being bossed around by a girl. As the princess, feeling like an imposter, was found by her soldiers, Gara revealed that another army had attacked their kingdom while they were away. Suddenly, the dragon spoke to Schneider, expressing belief that he hadn't forgotten it after 15 years. Meanwhile, Kai-Su, strategizing, received news of Gara's fortress falling and his betrayal. Suspecting Gara was tricked into following Schneider, Kai-Su sent one of the 4 heavenly kings, Ni, to deal with Schneider, believing he was ruining them. Ni, also commanding the army attacking the palace, received a plea for negotiation. However, the high priest knew it wouldn't be easy, their opponent being a heavenly king. Ni, refusing to forgive opposition, ordered the envoy killed. Suddenly, a message from Kai-Su arrived, ordering her to kill Schneider. Shocked, she returned to camp to rest. Ni then encountered Schneider in an illusion. He noted she hadn't changed much, being a dark elf. He had saved and taken her in after she was separated from her war-torn clan, seeing himself as a father figure to her. Enraged, Ni told him to stop manipulating her feelings. She had loved him, only to discover his hidden harem. Schneider justified it as a man's desire, but Ni, unconcerned, shattered the illusion with lightning. she ordered her subordinates to find Schneider, as she was busy commanding the army. The dragon, observing Schneider's failed reconciliation with Nie, wondered why it followed him instead of Gara. It turned out Schneider had secretly slipped away, and the dragon had simply followed. Schneider, still annoyed by the dragon, threatened to tear it apart if it reverted to its 15 years ago form. Suddenly, they came across a girl being chased by a giant spider. Schneider, wanting to play the hero, rushed to her rescue. The dragon found it strange to see a giant spider in this area, but Schneider was more interested in impressing the girl. After finishing off the spider with a single move, Schneider noticed a talisman fall from its body, suggesting it was summoned. Observing the girl, who had a sweet appearance, Schneider's interest piqued. She led Schneider back to her home to express her gratitude. He deduced she was likely a lord's daughter. The dragon, sensing Schneider's perverted thoughts, got swatted away. That night, after dinner, Schneider retired to his room. The dragon found it odd that this place remained peaceful despite the ongoing war. Schneider, not in the mood for idle chatter, silenced the dragon. Suddenly, the girl entered, offering herself to Schneider as a way of thanking him. Not one to refuse such an offer, he readily accepted. The dragon, sensing a trap, got pelted with a pillow by Schneider for interrupting. As Schneider removed his shirt, he noticed bruises on the girl's shoulders from armor. Before he could react, she slapped a talisman on him, and he was ensnared by a giant spider. She introduced herself as Ari, a trusted subordinate of Nie. With his magic disabled, Schneider found himself at the spider's mercy. However, to Ari's shock, he was sitting behind her. He had used an illusion to trick her, blurring the lines between real and fake. He whispered sweet nothings, playing on her emotions. Having never experienced kindness except from her master, Ari quickly fell for Schneider's manipulation. The dragon, realizing the situation, urged for a scene change, declaring this wasn't an adult film. The next morning, Schneider decided to set off again, and Ari informed him that Nie still hadn't forgiven him and that there was another assassin ahead. She feared Schneider would die, but he promised they would meet again. As he left, Schneider slightly regretted only lightly biting Ari's ear the previous night and not going further, feeling a bit remorseful now. Nie, hearing that Ari had let Schneider go, realized it was a disaster another person had fallen for Schneider's charm. Schneider didn't care whether someone was a friend or foe. Any girl who touched him would be immediately captivated. Nie considered Schneider the most dangerous person for girls. Soon after, Schneider encountered the assassin Ari had warned him about. This person was Kai Han. Schneider, noticing he appeared to be a man, asked the dragon who was more handsome, him or Kai. The dragon couldn't decide, so Schneider kicked it away. The monsters Kai had brought charged at Schneider, who instantly wiped them out with a single move. Kai then confronted Schneider, asking where Ari was, not believing she would betray them. Schneider told him that Ari had fallen for him and that he had already slept with her. Enraged, Kai attacked with a slicing move, but Schneider dodged using an illusion and struck Kai with an explosion. Kai also used an illusion to dodge, forcing Schneider to draw the demon fire sword from before to block the attack. Schneider counterattacked, shattering Kai's armor, revealing her to be a woman. However, Kai, confident she was second only to Nie, launched an attack and began to petrify Schneider. Schneider, not pleased, thought if he were to be petrified, he would prefer a more stylish pose. Schneider didn't like the idea of being petrified. If he had to be turned to stone, he wanted to be in a stylish pose. He then realized this was an ancient spell, and to break it, he needed to know which god had cast it. If he could identify the god, he could ask a deity close to the caster to help undo it. With dozens or even hundreds of gods, figuring out the one who cast this spell would take more time than he had. Kai, not wanting him to remain intact in stone, aimed to shatter the statue, fearing someone might come along and revive Schneider. Just as she was about to launch her attack, Ari summoned spiders to block it. She had fully devoted herself to Schneider, choosing to protect him, believing Schneider was stronger than all the 4 heavenly kings combined. She vowed to defend Schneider, even if it meant opposing her master. Kai destroyed Ari's spiders and was determined to kill both of them. She inadvertently mentioned the name of her deity, giving Schneider crucial information to break the petrification spell. Schneider, smug about his good looks, disgusted Kai, who continued her assault. However, Schneider revealed that the deity she had a pact with was subordinate to the gods he had allied with, rendering her spell ineffective. He then fired an arrow, causing Kai's clothing to start flying off. He mentioned he was going easy on her because she was a woman. But at that moment, she summoned a Kerzah, a monster she controlled through a crystal. It could exhale a gas that caused petrification, and since the gas wasn't magical, Schneider had to avoid breathing it in. Schneider tried to pull Ari in the opposite direction of the wind to avoid the gas, but when the monster wasn't releasing gas, it would stomp with its feet. After a while, Schneider's arm was petrified. Ari, in an attempt to protect Schneider, stood in the way of the gas, causing it to blow back towards Kai. She dropped the crystal in her haste, and the monster went out of control. Now regaining his confidence, Schneider found it easy to handle an uncontrolled monster. With a single explosive move, he dealt with the creature. Confident that Kai now owed him, he was surprised when she asked him to kill her, saying he would regret it if he didn't. Schneider told her she could try to kill him whenever she liked. Schneider then helped her by absorbing the toxic gas from her system. He asked Ari to take care of Kai while he continued his journey. Kai warned him about Ni's final subordinate, a count with immortality techniques and the strongest of them all. Schneider thanked her for the information and set off. Schneider thanked Kai for the information and set off. Meanwhile, Kai began to understand Ari's feelings for Schneider. After traveling for a while, Schneider realized he had used too much magic, and the seal of Lucy was getting stronger. He then transformed back into Lucy, leaving the dragon unsure of what to do. Meanwhile, at the palace, the princess had returned. The high priest informed her that Yoko had gone out with the soldiers to find Schneider. The soldiers had been overwhelmed by the numerous monsters, but Gaara and his 2,000 ninja troops arrived to help defend them. Lucy and the dragon were wandering, looking for Yoko, when Lucy accidentally discovered Yoko bathing in a lake. Yoko shouted with joy, causing the soldiers to rush in to check the situation. This time, she screamed for real and chased them out. Indeed, kids have their privileges. The soldiers were surprised to find out that the little boy was actually the black magician, Schneider. They then wondered about the dragon, and Yoko remembered its name was Lars. The soldiers were shocked because Lars was the name of the princess's brother, who was bestowed the title of Dragon Knight and was also one of the 5 heroes who defeated Schneider years ago. No one knew if Lars was dead or alive because he disappeared after the battle. They suspected that this dragon was the reincarnation of Prince Lars. Meanwhile, the count who was mentioned earlier by Kai had received news that 2 of Ni's subordinates had been defeated by Schneider. He was determined to prepare thoroughly, confident that Schneider could not defeat his immortal body. To further enhance his power, he needed the blood of virgins. Among the girls brought to him by his despicable subordinates, one had already been defiled. Enraged, he drained the blood of his subordinate as punishment. At the same time, a werewolf was also hunting young women. Yoko, who was putting Lucy to sleep, sensed a strong demonic aura and alerted the soldiers to prepare. They confronted the werewolf, who effortlessly knocked them down with a single swipe. Finding Yoko appetizing, he was about to devour her when Schneider woke up. Schneider insulted him, calling him a mere dog. Enraged, the werewolf lunged at Schneider, but even when punched, Schneider felt no pain and retaliated with a powerful blow. He then pinned the werewolf to the ground and decided to show him his magic. He used his ultimate move, Hellfire, and with just a flick of his wrists, he severely burned the werewolf. The terrified creature begged the count for help, making Schneider realize that the only one who could command a werewolf was a vampire. He wondered why an immortal being like a vampire would serve Ni and suspected that the count was collecting the blood of virgins to increase his power, aiming to overthrow both Ni and Kai Su. He demanded answers from the werewolf, promising to spare its life if it confessed. But just as it confirmed Schneider's suspicions, it was brutally killed with its head crushed underfoot. Yoko then confronted Schneider for leaving and for turning back into Lucy. She also demanded to know the names of the 2 girls he had mentioned earlier, threatening to either make him talk or deny him sleep. Slightly intimidated, Schneider asked for some time. The count, who had been observing the whole time, realized that Schneider had not fully revived and was still sealed within the boy's body. He recounted how Schneider had rebelled against the 4 kingdoms with his 4 disciples, and that Schneider grew stronger with each reincarnation. At his peak, Schneider would be an insurmountable opponent, but in his current state, the Count believed he could defeat him. The Count and his forces descended, and Schneider, noticing Lucai had awakened, was instantly trapped again. Learning another crucial piece of information, the Count ordered his men to capture both Lucai and Yoko immediately. Taken back to his castle, the Count gloated at how easily he captured the legendary magician and also gained 3 virgin girls as a bonus. Besides Yoko, the other 2 were Ari and Kai, who had also been captured and brought there. Kai still despised the Count as she did in the past. Both she and Ari had pretended to be captured to be brought before him. They had already broken free from their restraints. Enraged by his subordinates' incompetence, the Count drained his blood once more. He was confident that by consuming the magic-infused blood of both girls, he would become even more powerful. But the 2 girls quickly combined their talismans and swordsmanship to attack him. Despite taking the full brunt of their combined attack, his regenerative abilities were too powerful. Kai drew out a crucifix and garlic to fight him. He pretended to be afraid, but it was only to catch her off guard and capture her. He began to drain blood from Kai's hand, believing that it would make him stronger than both Ni and Kai Su. Ari interjected, placing her faith in Schneider to stop him. The Count simply scoffed at her hope, pointing out that their only hope was locked away above. He then revealed the truth about Schneider's seal to the girls. Lars finally understood that the High Priestess had implanted Lucai's personality into Schneider's reincarnated body. Lucai's personality was stronger and had completely dominated Schneider for the past 15 years. This was evident in Lucai's easy control, while Schneider could only take over when Lucai was asleep. The Count mocked the girls, stating that once he dealt with Schneider, their threat would be gone, and he would become the most powerful. Up above, witnessing the scene below, Lucai unleashed his power. Meanwhile, Gara was leading the soldiers against the monsters, launching a giant dart to clear a wave of enemies. He wondered what Schneider was doing at that moment. Schneider was struggling to wrest control from Lucai after seeing what the Count had done to his girls. However, Lucai was still too strong. The Count sighed in relief, seeing Schneider was still trapped. He moved towards Ari to drain her blood, but Yoko kicked him in the face, infuriating him. He turned to attack her in a rage. This, however, was the final straw for Schneider. Enraged at Yoko being targeted, Schneider finally broke free from his prison to confront the Count. He declared that the Count would pay for laying a hand on his Yoko and attacked with a combination of lightning and ice magic. However, even after the magical assault, the Count appeared unscathed. Believing himself truly stronger than Schneider, the Count charged, firing a beam from his eyes. The 3 girls watched in horror as the beam seemingly struck its target, leaving behind only Schneider's arm. Ari, determined to protect Kai, stood up to fight, but the Count simply laughed at her, claiming her hope was already gone. But as he laughed, Schneider's voice joined in. He revealed that the one struck by the beam was not him, but one of the Count's own subordinates. The Count, realizing his mistake, tried to turn and fire again to avoid being hit. But his subordinate was caught in the crossfire. Schneider, standing protectively in front of Yoko, absorbed the Count's attack and fired it back. The Count, believing he had dodged the attack, suddenly realized the sun had risen. The sunlight struck him, burning him to ashes. Despite his power, he was still vulnerable to the sun. Lars, believing Schneider had dealt with the Count, was surprised to see a bat emerge from the ashes. Schneider quickly caught the bat, knowing that if it reached its sanctuary, the Count would resurrect in 2 days. He took a piece of the bat's wing to perform a spell. This spell would be implanted into the bat. If the Count tried to possess it again, the spell would activate, killing him and transforming him into a leper, unable to ever resurrect again. The Count screamed in anger and despair, while Schneider only laughed. The Count's remaining forces fled. Schneider then helped Ari retrieve Kai, instructing her to take her to the temple for healing. He then checked on Yoko to see if she was hurt. The 2 girls questioned him about the other girl. Schneider simply stated that Yoko was the one he had chosen, while Ari was still pending. Gara, meanwhile, had defeated all but the last of the monsters. Kai Su, observing everything, was shocked that Schneider had managed to manipulate almost all of their subordinates. The remaining member of the 4 Heavenly Kings, Abigail, suspected that Ni might betray them because of her father, Schneider. If Ni dared to confidently claim she wouldn't betray them, he would use the same magic that Schneider had used on her. She challenged him to use the magic on her to prove her willpower. Abigail then cast the spell on Ni and warned her to behave or she would turn into a toad. Kai-Su later thought that Abigail was overreacting, but Abigail explained that Ni had lived with Schneider for 100 years and was closer to him than anyone else, making her recent actions necessary. Kai-Su knew that Schneider was a cruel man to both his enemies and subordinates, but he hadn't killed Gara or Ni's 3 subordinates. What had changed Schneider in the past 15 years? Abigail realized that Schneider's army and Kai-Su should split up to break the 2 other seals while Ni held Schneider down. To revive the darkness, they needed Schneider's heart. If Ni wanted to live, she had to kill Schneider. If Schneider wanted to save Ni, he would have to sacrifice himself. No matter the outcome, one of them would have to die. Schneider and Yoko bid farewell to Ari as she would take Kai to get treatment. As they got on the carriage, Ari knew that she would never gain Schneider's affection, but hoped he would remember her. Yoko then warned Schneider against toying with others' feelings, and that once he decided to pursue someone, he had to be loyal. Meanwhile, Gara encountered Ni. She confronted him about why he had betrayed them, and he replied that he was happier with Schneider. They then unleashed their most powerful sword techniques. Gara realized that Ni's sword was one of the strongest legendary swords, the Thunder God Sword. His sword was also a legendary sword, but not as powerful as hers. Gara then held his sword in his mouth and launched a barrage of kunai. He then launched a giant dart to force Ni to jump, and his dragon attacked her, giving him an opportunity to strike a fatal blow. However, what he struck was a demon, while Ni appeared behind him to counterattack. The bridge split in 2 after their attack, and everyone thought Gara had been struck. However, he suddenly reappeared. He had used a shadow clone technique, and the real Gara was uninjured. He returned to the bridge and began to take off his armor to lessen the weight, as it was useless against the Thunder God Sword. He then unleashed his long-range technique that he had used against Schneider, but with both hands. A flurry of swords flew towards Ni, but she knew only one of them was real. She identified the real attack and blocked it, but the attack was too powerful, and her sword broke in half. Everyone believed that Gara had won, as Ni was helpless without her sword. Gara would spare Ni's life, as she was important to Schneider. The officials inside were amazed at Gara's strength and didn't know how he had suddenly sided with them. Ni was furious that Gara had listened to the royalty and abandoned their ideals of an equal society. However, Gara didn't care about the ideals that Kai-Su had outlined. For him, as long as he was happy, he would follow. Ni continued the fight, charging forward with her broken sword, imbuing it with lightning magic. Gara, underestimating her, rushed forward and realized his sword couldn't block the attack. He was struck, and Ni explained that the blade infused with lightning was the true Thunder God Sword. No physical sword could withstand it. Gara was about to be finished off when a magical attack flew in, knocking Gara and Ni back. The princess recognized the caster on the opposite side. It was none other than Schneider. The bridge had completely collapsed, effectively blocking any advance from the enemy. Schneider explained that the spell was a new one he had created, which he still had difficulty controlling. Gara cursed Schneider for almost harming him with a spell. If he wanted to experiment, he shouldn't test it on his allies. Ni was saddened to see Schneider with another girl, as he had always been by her side, while she had been waiting for him. Even after being reborn, he still caused her heartache. She vowed to take Schneider's life today. However, Schneider had already appeared behind her, and began to overwhelm her with what could be considered perverse actions. Gara, meanwhile, was eating dog food and dragging himself along due to his injuries, but no one paid attention to him. After hearing Schneider confess his love for her, Ni began to waver, but due to the seal Abigail had placed on her, she pushed Schneider away and called for her mount to fly away. The princess was relieved that her kingdom was saved. Ni, however, was heartbroken, as she and Schneider had been together for so long and had such a deep bond. She was willing to forgive him for everything, and even willing to abandon her ideals for an equal society for him, if he weren't cursed. That evening, Gara warned Schneider that Ni was now much stronger than before. If Schneider underestimated her, he could be killed. Listening to their conversation, Yoko wondered about the nature of Schneider and Ni's relationship. The High Priestess saw that it was raining, which meant the enemy wouldn't attack, giving them time to repair their defenses. Yoko went to the mess hall to personally distribute food and encourage the soldiers. Everyone was cheered up by Yoko distributing food, except Schneider, who was only given a small portion. He couldn't accept this and tried to eat quickly to ask for more, but Yoko still gave him very little, causing him to become furious. The two argued, with Yoko's anger stemming from Schneider's constant flirting with other women. Schneider argued that it was no big deal, and that all the handsome men were dying off. In the end, Schneider couldn't win the argument and conceded defeat. Everyone was terrified of Yoko, as she had complete control over the Dark Sorcerer. That night, the princess and the high priestess went to visit the oracle, a woman with the ability to see the future. The high priestess asked her to examine the seal on Schneider, as he had awakened twice while in Lucé's body, and most recently had transformed back into his sorcerer form without Yoko's kiss. It could be seen that Schneider used the power of his will to break the seal. However, someone as wicked as the old Schneider wouldn't have been able to convince the goddess to loosen the seal. The real reason was that Schneider had now changed, becoming someone who understood love and successfully persuaded the goddess to loosen the seal. Suddenly, the old woman foresaw a vision of Schneider losing his heart and dying. Gara noticed Yoko seemed worried and told her that it would be tough for Schneider to defeat Ni now. Both had equal strength, and if they fought, whoever ran out of energy first would lose. While the old Schneider wouldn't have cared, the current Schneider was too kind-hearted. Yet, this kindness made Schneider more approachable than before. Yoko went to Schneider and overheard the princess warning him about his death, as she had seen in a vision. Schneider was surprised the seer was still alive and dismissed all her warnings, confident that someone as handsome as him could never lose, let alone die. The high officials thought he was up to something, but the princess chose to believe him because he had protected the kingdom many times and she didn't want him to shed more blood for this place. Schneider laughed at this, saying his goal was still world domination and that he was rebuilding his army for himself. Meanwhile, the seer and the high priest discovered a surge of hateful magic within Ni recently, and it seemed she had used this storm to blind them. Schneider decided to teach the princess a lesson about what happens when she enters a man's room at midnight. She was willing to give herself to him if it meant he would stay. However, Yoko barged in and threw Lars at Schneider. Suddenly, he realized a spell was being cast, and as he finished his sentence, the palace crumbled under the destructive magic. Gara recognized that only Schneider could cast such a spell, but since Schneider was also affected, Ni was the only other possible culprit. Seeing Schneider with another woman made Ni even angrier and more determined to kill him. Schneider, taken by surprise, didn't have time to create a larger barrier. Despite the two girls' pleas for him not to fight, Ni came to Schneider, making it impossible for him to avoid the confrontation. Borrowing 500 yen from Yoko, Schneider went to battle. Gara noticed Ni's sword had been restored, and feared Schneider was in real trouble. Schneider used a flight spell to engage Ni, but she used a technique to drain his magic power, causing him to fall. Ni's clever strategy of blocking Schneider's greatest strength, his magic, left him vulnerable. She attacked from her mount while Schneider attempted to defend with a wall of fire, which was quickly absorbed, leaving him open to Ni's attacks. Gara, frustrated that he couldn't help Schneider, watched as the demon from the fire sword emerged to aid Schneider. It declared Schneider its master and vowed to protect him. He then grabbed his sword and faced Ni, but his target was her mount, aiming to stop her from flying. The ground beneath Schneider collapsed, and Ni followed him down to continue the fight. She was surprised to see him wielding the flame sword, but it wasn't a major concern, as her thunder beast in the sword was stronger than the fire demon. The two swords released two beams of light, making everyone think it would be a balanced battle. But a swordsman against a mage in a sword fight is clearly at a disadvantage. Both swords were extremely powerful, so it was possible that the fight would end in a single blow. Gara knew they were both focusing all their strength into this one attack. They stared at each other for a moment before Ni made the first move, putting Schneider at a disadvantage. The demon sword made a bold decision, sacrificing itself to pull the thunder sword's soul into the ball of lightning, ending them both. With the sword gone, Ni couldn't do anything to Schneider anymore. But she immediately lunged at him, stabbing him straight in the head. Everyone thought he was finished, but Schneider sprang back to his feet. Since the ball of energy was gone, he could now fight with magic again. But don't forget that Ni was also a student of Schneider's, so her magic wasn't any less potent. She then chanted spells at the same time as Schneider and flew up. both of them unleashing lightning magic with equal power. This again made Gaara realize that whoever hesitated even slightly or ran out of energy first would be defeated. They then both used high-level fire magic to burn the entire area around them. Gaara knew they were going to kill each other and tried to stop them, but they had both finished chanting and charged at each other. Halfway through their flight, Sona was hit by memories of his past with Ni, and he was the one who ended up hurt by the attack. Gaara realized that Schneider was being influenced by his emotions and lost focus for a moment, losing control of the flames. Ni was also furious that Schneider was letting his emotions control him at such a critical moment. It was clear that he had changed a lot. The princess was worried that Schneider was dead, but Yoko didn't believe it because he hadn't paid her back yet. She had taught Schneider that you always have to pay back anyone you borrow money from. Then, from the wreckage, Schneider returned stronger than before. He bragged that he wasn't weak and there was no need to worry, but in reality, Schneider had suffered quite a few injuries. Ni was still not going to give up and was determined to take Schneider's life. But he stood up and said that he still loved her. But she wasn't fooled because Schneider had said that to every woman he met. She then summoned a bunch of lightning spirits. This was a double-edged sword because they would attack their master if they lost focus. Schneider had no choice but to summon fire spirits to counter them. The two chased each other again, and Schneider couldn't understand what her ideals were and why she and Kai-Su were so obsessed with them. She said she wanted to create a peaceful society, which Schneider found ridiculous. He thought that war and conflict were inherent to humanity, and the peace she desired wouldn't last long. In the past, during the war between humans and fairies, a person like her, a hybrid of fairy and human, was not accepted by either side. The war spread, leaving her abandoned amidst the devastation, without anyone to take her in. This led her to desire the creation of a society where individuals like her could find a place to belong. However, Schneider approached her, reminding her of their first meeting and the subsequent 100 years they spent together, filled with joy. She acknowledged that those 100 years had been like paradise to her, but due to the curse on her hand, she was forced to push Schneider away. Abigail reveled in this situation, while Kai-Su felt otherwise. Losing Ni would leave only the two of them to face Schneider. Ni still believed Schneider was trying to manipulate her, leading to another fight. Gaara noticed the unusual behavior of the fire spirit, suggesting that Schneider was reaching his limit. Despite this, Ni continued to attack Schneider, believing that she was merely an adopted daughter to him, a whim of his. However, to her, Schneider was both her savior and the one she loved most. She punched Schneider away, hoping he wouldn't get back up, but he persisted, while the curse continued to consume her. Her electric spirits began to act outside of her control, attacking Yoko, causing Schneider concern. Nevertheless, Ni remained stable. The spirits then targeted both her and Schneider, but she managed to shield them with a barrier. She pretended to maintain control, deceiving Schneider to retrieve Yoko and use it as a threat. Schneider made a serious decision, and they both cast a supreme spell that he hadn't mastered yet. This was ultimate destruction magic, capable of leveling the surrounding area. Ni concealed her curse to keep it from Schneider, and as the spell unfolded, Gaara perceived her to be at a significant disadvantage. Yoko, unwilling to see them destroy each other, told Gaara to do something, but interfering would mean certain death. They couldn't hear them anymore, and the spell, once cast, couldn't be retracted. In the midst of the attack, Schneider heard Lucai's voice, who urged him to witness the suffering of the woman he loved. He realized her curse and recognized Abigail's hand in it. Lucy knew that Ni, unable to live in a toad's body, desired to die at his hands. As she prepared to surrender, Schneider, enraged with Abigail, redirected the spell away from her. The beam of light soared towards the sky. Afterwards, he arrived before Ni, determined to grant her freedom. With a direct strike, he pierced her and extracted her heart, right in front of her eyes. This action successfully lifted the curse. Everyone was shocked by Schneider's actions. The prophetess acknowledged the fulfillment of her prophecy. Yoko, overwhelmed, fainted, while Ni could only mourn Schneider's loss. Abigail reveled in this outcome, as the threat was eliminated. With Kai-Su, he began the process of dismantling the two barriers protecting the neighboring kingdoms. On Kai-Su's side, he simply froze the entire kingdom, rendering it incapable of resistance. Abigail, on the other hand, unleashed his army of undead to sweep across the remaining kingdom. Yoko approached Schneider's corpse, unable to do anything but leave a kiss on his lips before departing. Lars arrived, sharing with Schneider that he had been searching for a worthy successor to his former Dragon Knight title. Ironically, it was Schneider, his former opponent, who was deemed the most suitable candidate. Suddenly, Schneider's body began to glow, transforming him back into Luce. Meanwhile, Kaisu and Abigail were nearing the completion of their task to revive the Dark God. The king, sensing this, understood that if the Dark God was resurrected, humanity would face extinction, just like in the previous world centuries ago. It was that destruction that led to the emergence of monsters, forcing humanity to unite and fight for survival. He resolved to inform the princess about the seal they possessed. Gara, having recovered, was aware of the impending Great War. He believed they could handle bones and undead, but if something worse emerged, they would have to face it. He thought Ni must be devastated by Schneider's death, but she hadn't contemplated suicide as atonement. Her priority was to fight for revenge. Abigail, confident in their ability to resurrect the Dark God, boasted that they had obtained the majority of its body. Only the brain, controlling its thoughts, was missing. Gara advised Ni to use the destructive spells she had employed in the previous battle. However, one spell required the lightning sword, and the other could only be used during a full moon. Ni discovered the enemy commander, a being with the strength of the vampire count, possessing immortality, armor harder than any sword, and extreme resistance to magic. Meanwhile, Abigail initiated the Dark God's resurrection without the need for the brain. Lars discovered that Luce had reverted back to Schneider just as the Dark God opened its eyes. Schneider also awoke. The High Priest, gazing at the night sky, realized that the two seals had been broken, and that something was happening to Schneider. Ni formulated a plan: eliminate the commander, leaving Gara and his ninja army to deal with the undead. Once the commander was defeated, the High Priest would use his undead slaying techniques to take care of the remaining ones. Yoko arrived, and together they witnessed Schneider's heart being restored. The Dark God's resurrection, along with the surrounding evil energy, gradually revived Schneider. Gara and Ni found themselves unable to inflict any damage on the commander, and they were thrown away. The commander revealed that the Dark God's revival had amplified the strength of those born from darkness, including him and Abigail. However, he remained unaware of another who had been strengthened. That person, though regaining his heart, was still without a heartbeat. Yoko leaped forward and slapped Schneider's face, waking him. She threatened to leave him if he didn't get up, prompting him to wake up in fear. The High Priest noticed that Schneider was indeed stronger than he had been 15 years ago. Gara and Ni acknowledged Schneider's return, but the commander informed them that they couldn't defeat him. He was a creation of the dark sorcerer Dosi, conjured through a summoning spell. The demon armor provided by Abigail, combined with the bodies of 100 strongest warrior corpses, made the commander practically invincible. Undeterred by his boasts, Gara and Ni combined their strongest techniques to attack the commander. However, their combined assault didn't even leave a scratch on the undead warrior. Dosi, smug and contemptuous, mocked Ni and Gara, then ordered the commander to kill them. Just as the zombie warrior was about to deliver the final blow, Schneider suddenly appeared, beating him to death despite wearing a sturdy demon armor. Not satisfied, Schneider also cast an explosion spell to blow away the commander and the annoying necromancer. Gara was very happy to see her teacher and close friends still alive, while Ni couldn't contain her excitement and ran to hug the one she loved. Having defeated the zombie legion, Schneider was hailed as a hero by the people of this country. Everyone thought Schneider was resurrected, but the High Priest and Lars knew that the awakening of the evil god had activated the power of darkness, so he had gained such overwhelming abilities. That night, Schneider disguised himself as Santa Claus to sneak into Yoko's room to return the 500 yen he borrowed from her. But she woke up and demanded more interest. But Schneider said he had no more money and was going to pay with his body, resulting in Yoko hitting him in the face with a spiked mace. Abigail was furious when he heard that his subordinates had been defeated by Schneider. He immediately ordered other warriors to go to the kingdom to cause chaos. The one sent this time was the one-eyed demon who possessed the demon mace, a weapon of destruction in Abigail's trio of demonic weapons. The one tasked with controlling the one-eyed demon was the drunken dwarf, who ordered his subordinates to wreak havoc on the city and slaughter the people of the kingdom. Just as the dwarf was about to harm a girl, Schneider appeared to give him a beating. Angry at being disrespected, the dwarf sorcerer ordered the one-eyed demon to attack Schneider, but it was quickly defeated by Schneider's lightning cannon spell. However, the wound that Schneider inflicted on the one-eyed demon suddenly healed. Not only that, it also transformed into a much more grotesque form. The one-eyed demon then used the demon mace to slam into the ground and create pillars of stone rising from the ground to bury Schneider. But such a trivial tactic didn't make someone who claimed to be handsome and cool like Schneider have to struggle. He easily escaped from the pile of rocks and used fire magic to burn the demon again. But the mutated demon healed its wounds and transformed into a new, more powerful form thanks to the evil god cells being injected into its body. Realizing the immense danger, Gara was about to jump in to help her friend, but Schneider refused her help. The one-eyed demon used the fully charged demon mace to strike the ground, causing part of the city to be destroyed in the blink of an eye. Schneider also dodged that destructive attack. He noticed that the one-eyed demon's body was starting to reject the evil god's grafted tissue, so Schneider had an idea. He asked Ni and Gara to join the battle and buy him some time. They all unleashed terrifying attacks to push back the demon, and when Schneider was done, he created a flame from forbidden magic to burn the demon. It created a barrier and Schneider kicked the dwarf inside it, so he would disappear forever. The spell was too dangerous to be recorded, and Schneider took all the credit, making Gara want to punch him because neither of them bought him time to chant that long spell and won for him. Schneider then stood and explained a bunch of theory about the magic he just used to Yoko. Gara couldn't understand it all, and Yoko forbade Schneider from using those dangerous spells again. Losing 2 battles in a row made Abigail even more bitter and eager for revenge than ever. He plotted to summon the strongest of his zombies, one who possessed powerful magic and a near-immortal body. He was currently imprisoned in the deepest part of an underground maze that no adventurer knew about. He was considered the king of the zombies. The kingdom was now in a state of chaos because Schneider was making the people homeless. The king was worried that riots would soon erupt and the treasury was running out. The princess wanted to relocate the seal to another place to avoid suffering for the people, but that was impossible. In the west of the kingdom, a giant storm suddenly appeared, foreshadowing misfortune that was about to befall the kingdom. The high priest had lost 2 demonic weapons and wondered what was so evil about these powers to be called demonic weapons. Gara was also feeling better and thought that Ni no longer had her magical sword, so she wasn't as strong as before. But she didn't want to rely too much on the sword. She also felt that Schneider had changed because of Yoko. The storm swept across the land, spreading death wherever it went. The last thing the people saw in the storm's eye was a death god with bright red eyes. Schneider was lying down while Yoko was cleaning his ears, and she missed Lucy, so he decided to let her see him for a while. But before he could unlock the seal, Gara ran in and reported a major incident. Schneider looked out the window and saw the storm heading towards them, and the death god had already arrived at their doorstep. The high priest said that there were countless evil demons in the world, but the most terrifying were the immortals. With their powerful magic and mystical secrets, they were far superior to humans. He wondered how human society could create such beings. We then learned that the death god outside was one of those immortal demons. His name was Lick. 50 years ago, the 4 royal families who guarded the 4 seals all originated from the purple royal family. That kingdom used to have a temperate climate and fertile land. However, overnight, purple turned into a swamp where even grass couldn't grow. According to ancient records, there were 4 people who became Lick thanks to the immortality spell. All 4 had their own dungeons and were once powerful priests and mages. Exactly 50 years ago, in that dungeon, a fool went to test the explosion spell. The shockwave from that spell was so powerful that it freed the Lick and caused the entire kingdom of purple to turn black in one night. You don't need to say the name of that fool. Yoko knows who it is. Schneider, Gara, and Ni now proactively went out to fight the Lick. Gara didn't understand how Abigail could persuade the Lick to fight, even though Lick's power was greater. Schneider explained that he had destroyed the Lick's dungeon before, and Abigail used that as a bait to lure the Lick to take revenge on him. Even though Schneider used magic to create a fire barrier surrounding the city to stop the advance of the black smoke, the Lick wasn't afraid of the fire at all. He walked through the flames as if nothing was happening. Schneider went crazy and provoked him, making the Lick reveal that he wasn't here for some petty grudge from the past. Next, the death god cast a spell to summon hundreds of evil spirits. Schneider continued to provoke him, causing him to unleash his attack and emit a heavy evil aura that corrupted anything it touched. Thinking that Schneider had been destroyed, but it wasn't difficult for Schneider to overcome that attack. Yoko felt something in the demonic weapon storage, while Ni felt that the energy of both sides was weakening. Gaara wanted Schneider to use his previous trick again, but he was still afraid of Yoko and didn't dare use it. He then used artillery fire aimed at Lick, but he could create a shield to nullify any magical attack from Schneider. As he was once a priest, such spells were nothing new to him. Using the shield would have prevented him from using magic, but he had another way: the Satan Ring. The final artifact in the set of 3 was his last resort. He chanted a spell and created a black hole to suck Schneider into it, aiming to transport him to another dimension. Schneider warned the others not to get near, fearing they'd be sucked in too. The High Priest and Lars recognized the black hole required immense magical power to sustain. The High Priest felt his own magic being drained. He realized it was the second effect of the demonic mace absorbing magical energy and transferring it to the ring. Yoko and Lars immediately rushed to check on the warehouse, while Ni, seeing Schneider about to be pulled away, didn't hesitate to dive in to save him. The black hole's immense pull and Lick's mocking words forced Schneider to let go to save Ni. Gaara arrived and tried to hold Ni back, but she dropped her sword and followed Schneider into the black hole. At the same time, Yoko unexpectedly encountered Abigail in the vault where the demon armor and demonic mace were stored. After witnessing his comrades being sucked in, Gaara remained determined to stop the Lick, no matter the cost. Abigail revealed to Yoko that the 3 artifacts had combined to create a black hole, and Schneider was undoubtedly gone. However, even facing one of the 4 heavenly kings, Yoko stood her ground, boldly confronting Abigail. Her confidence even seemed to intimidate him, as she confidently declared that Schneider wouldn't be so easily killed. Gaara, still believing Schneider and Ni were alive, decided to fight Lick with the power of the Holy Sword. He unleashed the ultimate technique, Demon God Sword, and charged towards the Death God with incredible speed, aiming to cut him down. However, the technique had no effect on the immortal being. Lick teleported behind Gaara, chanted a spell, and blasted him into a rock. Gaara survived thanks to his armor, but he knew another hit would be fatal. Left with no other choice, Gaara had to resort to the secret power of the Holy Sword, hoping for a slim chance of victory. The Holy Sword, passed down through generations of legendary swordsmen, possessed the true ability to dispel demons and evil. But using this power meant the user would be drained of their life force, leading to death. Despite knowing the cost, Gaara was determined to use this destructive technique to save his comrades from the endless prison. As he was gathering power, Gaara was struck again. His body was pushed to its limits, but he still managed to stand. With incredible dexterity, he manipulated the Holy Sword, unleashing fiery strikes at the demon. However, Gaara was still pushed back. The demonic mace had absorbed half his strength, rendering his attack insufficient to kill Lick. Additionally, his heavily injured body after using the forbidden technique would make even a light touch from the Death God enough to send him to his end. Fueled by unwavering determination, Gaara launched another attack with the power of the demon sword. This time, the attack's power was enough to overcome Lick's immortality. However, the cowardly Death God used the power of the Satan Ring to regenerate, unaware that it would open the prison. From within the prison, Ni's lightning beast emerged and lunged at the Death God, biting his shoulder. Following close behind were the blazing sword and Schneider, along with Ni. Enraged by Lick's audacity in hurting his dear friend Gaara, Schneider, clutching the blazing sword, charged forward and turned Lick to ashes. Lick lamented that he hadn't been able to discover the power beyond the evil god. As the battle concluded, Schneider gave a farewell to Gaara, preparing to send him off to his final slumber. Unbearable by Schneider's indifference, Gaara returned from the dead and scolded him. Schneider, seeing that the sword had drained Gaara's life force, didn't utter a single prayer or offer any solace. Furthermore, he told Gaara to give up on Ni. Gaara was bewildered. It seemed that instead of draining his life force, the sword had actually infused him with power. Ni contemplated the power greater than the evil god that Lick had mentioned earlier. At the same time, the Satan Ring suddenly flew away. It had automatically returned to reunite with the other 2 artifacts. Yoko noticed that his plan had failed. Abigail, knowing that Lick was defeated, planned to return soon to claim all 3 artifacts. He had to leave the storage room to plan for the next attack, but the kingdom's soldiers stopped him. However, with the power of the tentacle armor, Abigail easily killed all those who stood in his way. Yoko had closed the door to block him, but he broke it down to escape. Ni returned because she felt something was wrong when she saw the flying ring. She encountered her former colleague wreaking havoc there. He thought Ni wanted to settle the score with him about the curse, but that was her own will, not forced. Moreover, she seemed to have changed. Ni knew that love was what changed her. She used to hate Schneider until he sacrificed his life to save her. That act took all her hatred away, and now she only had love for him. So now, besides wanting revenge on Abigail for what he did to Schneider, she also wanted to ask him about the power that the Lick mentioned. He refused to tell her anything, so she didn't hesitate to use force to get him to confess. Abigail was confident that he could defeat Ni thanks to his tentacle armor. It wasn't just a living object powered by magic, but also a lightning rod that nullified all lightning spells from Ni. Ni had to cast her strongest lightning spell to see if the armor could withstand it. The damage from the spell was incredibly powerful, affecting both Abigail and Ni. The high priest, knowing something was happening in the basement, worried about his daughter, who was down there too. Abigail remained unharmed after the lightning strike and grabbed Ni from behind. However, Ni seemed to have anticipated this. She was not only strong in lightning magic, but also in wind magic. She created a sharp whirlwind that blew him away. He was confident that he was empowered by the demon, but let's see if her magic could do anything to him. He still held his ground and wouldn't answer any questions from her. She decided to increase her power and give him another blow. Taking advantage of the tense situation, the general commander spoke to the king about finding a way to eliminate Schneider and the 4 heavenly kings under him. He was still worried that Schneider and the 4 heavenly kings would secretly overthrow them at any time. Schneider, who was eating noodles nearby, immediately poured the noodle broth over the general commander's head to teach him a lesson for being so cunning. He then told them not to be so cocky because he was still the one who determined the fate of this kingdom. The king had to humble himself to express his gratitude for Schneider and Gora, who had saved this kingdom from countless crises. However, setting that aside, Schneider had something to ask the princess. She knew he wanted to ask about the secret of the last seal. The king wanted to stop his daughter from revealing it, but the high priest stopped him. As for Abigail, he was badly injured after directly taking the whirlwind from Ni. She knew that Abigail had lied to them about that ideal society. When the demon was activated, it would destroy the world until nothing was left. And it wasn't easy for someone like him to control the demon. With the advantage, Ni summoned the Thunder Beast and had it transform into a Thunder God sword for her to deal with this annoying demon cultist once and for all. The princess then started to reveal all the secrets about the seal that the royal families had held since ancient times to Schneider. The 4 oldest royal families on the continent had been entrusted with the responsibility of containing the god of destruction. The old world entrusted them with that task, so protecting the seal had helped to form the royal families. The princess revealed that the last seal wasn't an object, but hidden within her body. The princess begged Schneider to protect the people and the world from evil because he was the only one who could do it. Schneider agreed to help, not out of obligation, but out of respect for the princess' courage, because she had gone all the way to the ninja fortress to save Yoko for him. Back on the other side, to face the legendary Thunder God sword, Abigail combined with the 3 magic weapons to become a super demon form. To put it simply, he became a robot. Abigail's power is now more terrifying than ever. Ni guesses that the power Abigail is using is most likely magic created by the former world. So, she pulls Abigail outside to make it easier for her to unleash the full power of the Thunder God sword. As soon as the target is within range, Ni immediately charges in to attack, but the demon armor's power negates all of her attacks. Taking advantage of the situation, Abigail finally reveals her true motives to Ni. The story of resurrecting the evil god to create a world of peace is just a pretext. Her real goal is to help the god of destruction reduce everything that exists on Earth to 0. Schneider suddenly appears with his golem and controls it to punch Abigail directly in the face. Ironically, the face revealed behind the invincible armor is its only weak point. Realizing that Schneider has become a good person, Abigail plays dirty by taking Nee hostage. Surprisingly, a man with such a strong ego like Schneider actually kneels down and begs Abigail to be merciful. Seeing the most powerful mage in the world acting like a crawling insect satisfies Abigail greatly. Just when Abigail lowers her guard, Schneider immediately controls the golem to punch his avatar, rescuing his beloved daughter. No longer hampered by the hostage, Schneider enters a state of high concentration and is ready to go all out against Abigail. Fearing the golem's power at close range, Abigail quickly uses magic to fire a lightning bolt, destroying the golem in one blow. Holding the advantage in equipment, Abigail arrogantly demands that Schneider submit to him, or he will spare him and his companions, but he refuses, infuriating Abigail, who, without hesitation, crushes him with a robot. Just when everyone thinks it's over, Schneider gets back up and even lifts Abigail's giant body with pure muscle power. Facing a strong opponent awakens Schneider's violent nature. He casts an ancient forbidden spell, trapping Abigail in the shadow boundary and letting it devour everything of him bit by bit until nothing is left. The seal in the princess's body is suddenly activated, freeing the evil god for a few short seconds, which also grants Abigail more dark power to break free from the spell. Schneider, not expecting this, is taken by surprise and loses his left leg, while his other arm is seriously injured. The high priest realizes that the seal in the princess's body is showing signs of breaking. Having regained the advantage over Schneider, Abigail begins to torture him ruthlessly. He kicks Schneider into the wall and stomps on him like a rag. Having eliminated his most formidable opponent, Abigail turns his attention to the princess to destroy the final seal. The high priest doesn't know how he knows this, but he only needs to deduce that they would hide the seal in a place he couldn't feel. And where else but in the body of the most important person in the country. In a desperate situation, Schneider remembers his promise to keep the princess safe and jumps up. He begins to cast the strongest spell he can, the same destructive spell he used to blow Nee and the castle into the air, but to his misfortune, Schneider's strongest spell has no effect on Abigail's demon armor. Just when he is about to lecture everyone from above, Nee also casts a destructive spell targeting him. Both ultimate spells combined produce a heat energy that is 1.5 times the black fire spell before, so its power is completely feasible to blow up the demon armor. The explosion consumes everything in the affected area, so the nobles and ninjas mistakenly believe that the battle is over. However, from within the dust cloud, Abigail's savage laughter rings out to extinguish everyone's hopes. Abigail has cast countless anti-spell charms on his body, allowing him to escape death by a whisker. Seeing Schneider still struggling to get up despite being battered and bruised, Gaara and Nee decide to join him in the fight. Yoko doesn't intervene and let them join the battle because she believes Schneider will never lose to someone like Abigail. Abigail intends to use the same move that destroyed the golem earlier, aiming at Schneider. Nee wants to jump in, but Gaara stops her, fearing she might hinder Schneider. But truly, they don't know how he can defeat Abigail now. Schneider gets up again, discarding his broken left arm, and continues fighting. From afar, Ari and Kai return and join the fight to support him. Yoko encourages Schneider, saying that if he wins this battle, she'll accept everything he says, even giving him her first time. Hearing this, Schneider's power suddenly surges. He unleashes his ultimate spell, transforming himself into a missile, crashing into Abigail's attack. He pierces through and targets his weakest point. But after defeating him, his own body breaks in two. Light returns to the entire kingdom. However, Schneider is close to death because of the reckless decision to push himself beyond his limits. Everyone mourns for Schneider, while Yoko remembers their time together. Then, Schneider wakes up again. He is not dead, but he regrets missing the opportunity to open Yoko's box, as she puts it. Yoko is angry and kicks him in the head. Gaara finally understands that Yoko is the only one who truly understands Schneider. However, their joy is short-lived. Abigail wakes up again and uses his tentacle armor to kidnap Yoko. He has lost the robot, but now this is more than enough to fight against the incomplete Schneider. Gaara and Nee seem fine on the surface, but their condition is not much different from Schneider. Gaara has a torn ligament in her right arm and internal injuries from the fight with the lick, while Nee is out of magic after casting the destruction spell earlier. Abigail has Yoko as a hostage to ensure his safety. He knows Schneider wouldn't attack recklessly, so he shoots him. Fearing that everyone will die because of her, Yoko begs Schneider to ignore her and fight back. Even if this world may not be perfect, they can't let him destroy it. Abigail sees that Yoko is reasonable, but if this were the old Schneider, he would have already attacked. However, the Schneider who is full of love and compassion now is different. The High Priest also knows that between the fate of the world and his daughter's life, the choice is easy for ordinary people, but not for Schneider. He is lost in thought, so Abigail immediately shoots him again. The nobles chime in, saying that the fate of the world is more important than the life of a single girl. But faced with these difficult choices, Schneider surprises everyone by boldly declaring that he will choose Yoko over the world. Abigail bursts out laughing, saying that Schneider has become too weak and is no longer the legendary mage. He launches a finishing blow, but just then, the spider from Ari's charm appears to block the attack and help Schneider. She frees Ni and Gara, and Kai makes a daring move to rescue Yoko. Abigail is furious as his plans are repeatedly thwarted, but he still can laugh because his tentacle armor has the cells of the god of destruction. He has borrowed the power of the evil god to create an army of undead to surround Schneider's group. Those who can wield swords charge into battle, while Ari stays behind to protect Schneider. Together, they fight and defeat many of the undead, but they are constantly being recreated through the evil god cells. To help Schneider's group, the kingdom's soldiers and Gara's ninja force join the battle. The strategy of overwhelming the enemy with sheer numbers is soon extinguished by Abigail when he decides to merge the undead into a giant super undead. Seeing an easy target, Ni quickly uses lightning magic to strike the enemy. However, the damage is too weak because she has exhausted her magic power beforehand. Abigail launches a barrage of bullets to wipe out almost all of the main force. At the same time, Schneider's key members have reached their limits. Gara has lost an arm, Ni is seriously injured in the leg, and Ari uses spiders to shield Schneider. In his hazy dream, Schneider sees Lucai, who proposes that he save the kingdom they both love. However, Schneider rejects the suggestion, claiming that the world and women have always been in his grasp, and he won't let that bastard Abigail turn him into a fool. Schneider wakes up again, bringing hope to everyone. He decides to take Abigail's life at any cost, but Abigail enjoys watching him try with his broken body and depleted magic. Everyone advises Schneider to give up and save his own life, but only Yoko, who understands him best, encourages him to defeat his enemy. Suddenly, fire spirits gather and create a temporary body for Schneider. With this literal hot body, Schneider manages to threaten Abigail. He realizes that Schneider is also being empowered by the evil god. Kai Su doesn't understand the meaning of the evil god's shouts, but it seems like they are resonating with something. Abigail now understands why Schneider was willing to sacrifice himself to save Ni, because he knew he would be empowered by the evil god. After all, he was the closest to the evil god, the former commander of the Dark Army. He talks too much, so Schneider punches him. Enraged at being interrupted, Abigail orders the giant undead to attack. But now, Schneider can easily block them. He casts a spell, and Abigail wants to break it, but a fire demon interrupts him, helping Schneider. He unleashes a destructive spell, forcing Abigail to merge more undead into the giant to take the extra burden. However, Schneider simultaneously casts a second spell, transforming himself into a missile and piercing through the giant. He then proceeds to incinerate Abigail's tentacles and punches him repeatedly. However, Abigail still has an ace up his sleeve, a ring that he has been taking hits for so he can use it to suck Schneider into a black hole again. But as he pulls out the ring, Schneider throws his fire sword, pinning him to a rock and preventing him from using magic. Schneider then collapses from exhaustion, whispering his final words to Yoko and closing his eyes. Everyone thinks he's dead, but his hand secretly gropes Yoko's butt, forcing her to swat it away. Their joy is short-lived because Abigail reappears somehow, probably another one of the illusion spells we've seen throughout the film. Yoko steps forward to protect Schneider and realizes that the spot where Abigail is standing is about to collapse. She rushes over and pushes a rock down on him, causing it to fall on him. She disappears, and Abigail is impaled on the ceiling and dies. The body containing the evil god cells begins to lose control and slowly destroys the entire area. Gara rushes over to protect Ni and Schneider, but they all vanish. Schneider's soul separates and finds Yoko. They disappear, and the army is left with only Kai-Su and his forces. Not long after, in a secluded samurai village, they find an intruder who turns out to be Yoko, bringing Lusai to seek their help. The first part of the movie ends here,